If no one knows where you live, then you have an advantage over all the people who live in a place like New York or Chicago or LA. YouTube, what is good? Welcome to the video. Today we are talking about creating in a small town. I tried to find a location that sort of matched what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be giving you my advice, my experience in making photography in areas where people say you can't make photos here. So if you watched the last vlog, which I highly recommend you do after this video, you know that over the weekend I stayed in a small town about an hour outside of Nashville. It's called Columbia, Tennessee. And while I was there, I went out to shoot quite a bit. I didn't vlog anything because I was hanging out with family, but I made a bunch of photos, a lot of photos that I really liked. And it got me thinking that there's probably a ton of people out there who live in a small town like Columbia and they have an interest in photography and they think they can't make photos in a small town like that. Me being from Atlanta, yes, Atlanta is a very big city. I've heard my entire career from people telling me you can't make photos in Atlanta. Atlanta is not a good photography city. There's nothing to shoot in Atlanta, when in reality, there is. And it just took me a few years to change my mindset and realize the things that I'm about to tell you that can apply to the small town you live in as well. So there's really 5 things that I want to talk about today, and hopefully by the end of the video, you'll look at the place you live as a place of endless photo potential instead of this small town where photography sucks. So step number 1 is to lose this idea that the place you live is boring. Yes, reality is reality, and the place that you live might not be as interesting as other places. But that doesn't mean it's uninteresting for photos. It's only gonna be boring if you keep telling yourself that it's boring. You see, I've been going to Columbia, Tennessee every year for the last 8 years, and for the first 6 years, I never made photos in downtown Columbia. I thought, this is boring. I thought interesting photos were crazy cityscapes, crazy landscapes, hero shots. You know what I'm talking about, type of stuff you see on Instagram a lot. By doing this, I didn't have to face the challenge that I might not have the skill to actually make interesting photos in a small town like Columbia. If I just used the excuse that a place was boring, I didn't have to face the reality that the challenge was there and I might not be able to do it. And that leads us right into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is accepting the challenge of the small town. It's a reality you gotta face, you know? If you live in a big city, there's photo opportunities everywhere. And I just said there are photo opportunities in places like this, but I'm not gonna lie to you, it is gonna be more of a challenge. You're gonna have to think more, you're gonna have to be more creative, you're gonna have to look harder for those interesting photos to make it happen. And that's not a bad thing. You should embrace this challenge, embrace the grind of trying to make photos in a place that so many people deem an unideal place to make photography. And look at photographers like Brandon Wiffel. Yes, he photographs in the city quite a bit, but he also makes a lot of photos inside of his house, inside of his bedroom, in his front yard, in his backyard, and the guy has millions of followers. So if he can figure out a way to make compelling images from his home and from his yard, you can too. See, something like this I really love with these power lines, the nice light coming off of it. We got this truck right here. Do not like the sign Raps.com thing, but we'll deal with that in post. And the Coke sign looks cool too, so I'm just gonna shoot from this angle right here. Speaking of Brandon Wiffel, that leads us to the third thing I want to talk about, which is collaboration. Collaboration is key to building creative ideas, especially early on in your career. Brandon collaborates with his friends. They're the models. He's the photographer. He makes photos of them. You see, they might come up with a concept for a photo shoot and he makes the photos. He might have an idea for a photo shoot and they make the outfit. You know, everybody just works together. Instead of working here and someone else working over here, work together to try to get to your common goals, especially if you're in one of these small towns. Early on in my career, I collaborated any opportunity I could. If I met somebody, I said, hey, you want a photo? I'd make a photo of them, I'd send it to them, they'd post it on their social media, I would get exposure that way, and I could also practice my photography, and they had a great photo to post. Everybody won. That's what's so great about collaboration is everyone benefits from it, and everyone can grow together if it's done properly. fourth thing I want to talk about might be the most important thing in this entire video. It goes back sort of to what I talked about at the beginning of the video about shedding that notion that the place you live is boring. And the fourth tip I have for you is never underestimate the strength of your story. I've talked about this before. I've talked about it a billion times on this channel. Everyone has their own story to tell. It's why I photograph Atlanta when everyone is telling me, yo, Atlanta has no street photography. Atlanta's not interesting for photography. I don't believe any of that. I think everyone has a unique story to tell. I think I have a story to tell, and I think my photography does a good job of that, and you do too. Never underestimate the strength of the photos that you can make and the people that you can inspire, especially if you have the skill to back it up. For the longest time, I overthought all my photography. I thought, no one's gonna find this interesting. This isn't interesting. Why am I making a photo of this? When in reality, I was just trying to tell my story the entire time. And I can't recommend this enough. I can't preach about it enough. It's so important. It's such a huge part of making photos, especially if you're in one of these areas that no one knows about. If no one knows where you live, then you have an advantage over all the people who live in a place like New York or Chicago or LA. These places get photographed every day. That story gets told every single day, but you live in a place that's untapped, a place with its own unique story, and thanks to the internet, you can get that story out there and you can inspire people, especially, like I said, if you have the photo skill to back it up. So get out there, make photos, tell your story, and don't overthink it. You know, that overgrown basketball court full of weeds that you think, hey, this looks pretty cool, make that photo and share it, because you never know how many people out there could see that and get inspired by it and wish that they had a story like yours to tell. So I've actually come to this location one time before, and in my head I had this idea for a completely different video, and then I got inspired to make this one. But when I was here, I made the photo of this scene right here because it reminded me of the movie Stranger Things, with the light, with the power lines. There was a crazy sunset happening at the time. It was like perfect blue hour, and I made a photo where I just set my camera up on a tripod, had the timer go, I ran out, got a silhouette of me. It was a really easy photo to make, but it was completely inspired by this mysterious Stranger Thing vibe that I got from this scene right here. So the fifth and final thing that I want to talk about is keeping your inspiration in line with reality. And what that means is you live in a small town, you live in a smaller area, pick your inspiration with things that are actually relevant to reality. What that means is, let's say I saw this incredible New York subway photo on Instagram or on the internet or something like that, and I go to Columbia, Tennessee thinking, yo, I want to make a subway photo like this or something inspired by this. Now, I realize this is a little bit of hyperbole. That is a very extreme example, and I hope no one would actually think that. But my point being, I'm probably not going to find an underground subway in Columbia, Tennessee. Now, maybe I would find some type of train station. If I did, maybe I'd have an opportunity to replicate some type of transit photo from somewhere like New York or Chicago, and that is okay. That's my whole point. If there was an above ground train station, maybe I look at what goes on in New York or these other cities and say, yo, my inspiration is this. I'm going to try to apply it to this. And when I was out in Columbia, Tennessee, in this small downtown square type thing, a lot of the scenes, a lot of the stuff I saw reminded me of my favorite movie, No Country for Old Men. And I started thinking in my head, yo, how can everything I'm seeing apply to the inspiration of that movie? Thinking of the downtown square scenes both during the day and during the night. And it just provided me with this level of inspiration and this insight and clarity into what I was going to be photographing. It inspired me. That's the whole point of inspiration. But if I looked at a movie like The Matrix or Lord of the Rings and applied it to this small town square in Columbia, Tennessee, I probably wouldn't have found the same level of inspiration. You want to keep your inspiration in line with reality. And I want to finish with this point right here. For the longest time in Georgia, I would go out to hike and I would think, yo, I just want my landscape photos in Georgia to look like the landscape photos I see out west, you know, places like Oregon, these phenomenal, beautiful landscapes. And for so long, I broke my back trying to make these interesting landscape photos, and I realized something. I'm never going to replicate the inspiration that I'm getting from out west here. My inspiration is not in line with the reality. But if I look at hiking and camping lifestyle photos from out west and apply those same principles, that same level of inspiration to hiking, camping, and lifestyle photos here, maybe I'm onto something then. So it's all about shifting your perception and making sure you're getting inspired by the right things that go with the reality of the situation you are in. So that's my advice, y'all. That's everything I got to talk about today. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna try to shoot the last of this sunset. Y'all are the truth, and I'll see you next time.